Death is the one journey every culture has tried to map. For thousands of years, humanity has stared into that great unknown and imagined entire worlds lying just beyond the veil. These are the underworlds, realms of shadow, judgment, and sometimes stunning beauty, each one a reflection of the people who dreamed it into being. In this exploration, we will uncover 35 of their most remarkable secrets, from the dusty halls of Mesopotamia to the frozen purgatory of the Inuit. You will gain a complete understanding of how our ancestors confronted the ultimate mystery. We will see why a Greek hero failed to rescue his love and what terrifying creature guards the Chinese hells. Which of these hidden realms do you think holds the most profound truth about life itself? Our journey begins in the dust of ancient Mesopotamia with one of humanity's oldest recorded visions of the afterlife. The Sumerians called it Ker, and to the Akkadians it was Urkala. This was not a place of fiery punishment or heavenly reward, but a vast, silent cavern deep beneath the earth. It was a land of darkness where the dead existed as listless shades, clothed only in wings like birds, forever deprived of light and sustenance. In this realm, a person's earthly deeds held no weight, kings and commoners alike reduced to the same grim, dusty existence. But to truly understand this bleak dominion, we must follow the journey of a goddess who dared to enter it, the story of Inanna's descent. The Queen of Heaven, Inanna, decided to visit her older sister, Ereshkigal, the Queen of the Underworld. It was a journey from which no one, not even a deity, was supposed to return. To reach her sister's throne, Inanna had to pass through 7 gates. At each one, the gatekeeper, following Ereshkigal's strict commands, demanded a piece of her divine regalia. Her crown was taken first, then her lapis lazuli necklace, her sparkling beads, and finally the very gown that clothed her body. By the time she stood naked and bowed before Ereshkigal's throne, she was no longer a powerful goddess, but merely a supplicant stripped of all identity and power. Ereshkigal, who ruled from a place of profound loneliness and pain, saw her vibrant sister not as a guest but as a threat. She fixed the eye of death upon Inanna, and the Queen of Heaven perished instantly, her corpse hung on a hook for all to see. This myth reveals the brutal, impartial rules of Urkala. The 7 gates were not just physical barriers, they were a process of utter deconstruction. They ensured that every soul, no matter how great, entered the land of the dead as an equal, a mere shadow of their former self. This stark equality in death was a powerful concept for the living. And in this shadowy realm, other terrors lurked, like the fearsome demoness Lamashtu. She was not a gatekeeper, but a predator who preyed on the most vulnerable, threatening mothers and newborns, a reminder that even in the ordered despair of the underworld, chaos could still strike. How did a goddess escape such a hopeless fate? The answer lies not in the underworld itself, but in the world of the living she left behind. Inanna's rescue came from the world above, a reminder that the living alone hold the power to challenge the stillness of death. But for the Egyptians, the afterlife was a far more personal and perilous voyage, one that demanded every individual become the hero of their own story. Their underworld, the Duat, was not a static cavern but a treacherous river of night, a landscape of both wonder and terror that the sun god Ra navigated in his bark each evening. His journey through the 12 hours of the Duat was a cosmic battle for the world's very survival. In the deepest dark, the serpent of chaos, Apep, would attack, seeking to devour the sun and plunge creation into eternal nothingness. Ra and his crew of deities fought him night after night, a struggle that mirrored the human soul's own fight against disorder and evil. This was an underworld in motion, a realm where the fate of the living was decided by the victories of the gods in the land of the dead. Yet for a mortal soul, the Duat presented a different kind of trial, a test of one's entire life condensed into a single, terrifying moment. This was the weighing of the heart ceremony. Imagine standing in the Hall of Two Truths, surrounded by a jury of powerful gods. Your heart, the seat of your conscience and memory, was placed on a giant golden scale by Anubis, the jackal-headed god of embalming. On the other side of the scale was the feather of Mot, representing truth, order, and cosmic harmony. This was not a test of piety, but of integrity. Had you lived a life in balance? Did your heart carry the weight of lies, greed, or violence? The gods would watch the scales in absolute silence. If your heart balanced perfectly with the feather, you were declared true of voice and granted access to the idyllic field of reeds, a perfect mirror of the life you loved. But if your heart was heavy with sin, the scales would tip. There was no punishment, no tormenting jailer. The consequence was utter annihilation. Crouching beside the scales was the devourer, Ammit, a monstrous fusion of crocodile, lion, and hippopotamus. She did not torture failed souls, she consumed them. With a single bite, the heart and the soul it contained were erased from existence forever. This was the ultimate fear, a final end far more terrifying than any torturous hell. It forced every Egyptian to ask a profound question of themselves, not in the moment of death, but every single day of their life. Is my heart lighter than a feather? The Greek vision of the underworld was a kingdom as complex and structured as their own world above. This was the realm of Hades, the stern and unwavering god of the dead, and his queen, Persephone, whose annual return to the surface brought the spring. To enter this subterranean domain, every soul had to cross one of its 5 mystical rivers. The most famous was the Styx, the river of hatred, by which the gods swore unbreakable oaths. But there was also the Akron, the river of woe, where the souls of the newly dead gathered. They waited there for the grisly ferryman, Charon, who would pole his skiff across the murky waters. A single coin placed in the mouth of the deceased was the toll for this final voyage, a tradition that explains why ancient Greek burials so often included this small, essential payment. Without it, a soul was doomed to wander the misty shores for 100 years. Upon reaching the far bank, the path led directly to the throne of the 3 judges. Minos, Rhadamanthys, and Aeacus, all former mortal kings, would weigh the deeds of a lifetime. Their judgment was swift and final, directing each soul to its eternal home in one of 3 distinct realms. For the vast majority of people, those who lived lives neither remarkably good nor exceptionally wicked, the destination was the Asphodel Meadows. This was a grey, twilight plain, filled with ghostly figures and the pale flowers of the asphodel plant. Here, souls existed in a state of quiet, dreamlike forgetfulness, a perpetual and bland reflection of a life lived without great passion or infamy. But for the truly virtuous, the heroes and the righteous, a far brighter paradise awaited. The Elysian fields were an eternal paradise of soft grass, gentle sunlight, and everlasting peace. It was a place of music, athletic contests, and comfort, a reward for those favored by the gods or who had achieved greatness. Yet, for those the judges deemed wicked, a very different fate unfolded in the deepest, darkest pit of the underworld. Tartarus was a prison of sheer, impenetrable bronze, a place of divine punishment reserved for the most grievous offenders. Its most famous inmate was the cunning king Sisyphus. His crime was the ultimate act of arrogance. He had attempted to cheat death itself by tricking and chaining Thanatos, the god of death. For this, his sentence was an exercise in eternal, meaningless labor. He was forced to push a massive boulder up a steep hill, only to watch it roll back down just before reaching the summit, condemning him to repeat this futile task for all eternity. His myth stands as a stark lesson against the hubris of trying to defy the natural order, a chilling reminder that in the Greek cosmos, the laws of the gods were absolute. From this land of judgment and distinct fates, our journey takes us east, to a vision of the afterlife so meticulously ordered it was run like a vast, unyielding bureaucracy. While the Greeks envisioned a kingdom ruled by a stern god, the Romans built an empire that required meticulous administration, and their vision of the afterlife reflected this very principle. Their underworld, known as Orcus or the domain of Dispater, was fundamentally a bureaucratic state. They adopted the Greek framework of Hades but stripped away much of its personal drama and divine temperament, replacing it with a system that felt more like an eternal civil service. The god Orcus himself was a distant, shadowy figure, less a personality and more a personification of the finality of death and the oath-bound contracts that governed it. This was an afterlife managed by procedure, where the fate of a soul was less about dramatic judgment and more about correctly filed paperwork and proper observance of ritual. The most important figures for an ordinary Roman were not the distant god of the dead, but the collective spirits known as the daimons. These were the revered ghosts of one's own ancestors, the benevolent spirits of the departed who watched over the family and its land. They were not judged souls in a far-off realm, but active, present forces in daily life, requiring constant appeasement through offerings of wine, food, and flowers at their tombs. A family that honored its daimons could expect protection and prosperity, but to neglect them was to risk their wrath, bringing misfortune upon the entire household. This relationship between the living and the dead reached its most dramatic expression during the Lemuria festival. Each year, on 3 specific nights in May, the head of a Roman household would perform a strange and haunting ritual to appease a different kind of spirit, the lemures. These were the restless and potentially malevolent ghosts of the dead, those who had died without proper burial or who held a grudge against the living. In the dead of night, the paterfamilias would rise, walk through his house barefoot, and make a specific hand gesture to ward off evil. He would then toss black beans over his shoulder as an offering to the ghosts, chanting, "With these beans I redeem me and mine." The belief was that the hungry, wandering spirits would take the beans and leave the family in peace for another year. This practice reveals a profound and practical fear of the unresolved dead, a belief that the underworld could leak into the world of the living if its bureaucratic and spiritual protocols were not strictly maintained. The Roman afterlife was therefore a mirror of their greatest societal strength and anxiety, a perfectly ordered system that could collapse into chaos if its intricate rules were ever broken. Far to the north, where the world tree Yggdrasil holds the 9 realms in its roots and branches, lies a dominion of cold so profound it is felt in the soul. This is Helheim, the Norse underworld, a land of freezing mists, bitter winds, and a silence broken only by the drip of icy water. It is ruled by its namesake, the goddess Hel, a daughter of the trickster Loki. Her appearance is as divided as her realm, one side of her body that of a beautiful woman, the other that of a decaying corpse. She presides not over a place of torment, but one of cold, quiet resignation. Helheim was the destination for all who did not die a warrior's death in battle. Those who succumbed to sickness, old age, or simple misfortune made the long, shadowed journey here, crossing the icy river Jøl on a bridge paved with glittering gold, a cruel and beautiful mockery of the warmth they had left behind. This stands in stark contrast to the glorious fate awaiting the slain warriors chosen by the Valkyries. They were taken to the golden halls of Valhalla in Asgard, where they would feast and fight each day in preparation for the final battle of Ragnarok. For the Norse, the manner of your death did not reflect your moral character. It simply dictated your eternal postal code, and the finality of Helheim's chill is perfectly captured in one of the most tragic stories of their mythology, the death of the beloved god Balder. Balder, the god of light and joy, was tormented by dreams of his own demise. His mother, Frigg, went to everything in the world from fire and water to iron and stone, and secured an oath from each that they would not harm her son. Believing him invulnerable, the gods made a sport of throwing weapons at Balder, watching them all fall harmlessly away. But Loki, in his malice, discovered one thing Frigg had overlooked, the mistletoe, which she deemed too young to swear an oath. Loki fashioned a dart from the plant and tricked Balder's blind brother, Hodder, into throwing it. The mistletoe pierced Balder's heart and he fell dead, his light extinguished from the world. The grief in Asgard was immeasurable. Hermod the Bold, another of Odin's sons, volunteered to make the desperate journey to Hel to plead for Balder's release. He rode Odin's own 8-legged horse, Sleipnir, down into the freezing darkness for 9 nights, crossing the bridge over Gjörl and finally arriving at Hel's high walls. He entered her hall and stood before the half-living, half-dead goddess, begging her to release his brother. Hel, moved perhaps by the depth of the god's sorrow, offered a single, cruel condition. If every single thing in all the worlds, alive and dead, would weep for Balder, then she would let him return. Hermod raced back with the message, and the gods sent out messengers across all of creation. The world wept, trees cried sap, stones shed tears of moisture, and every metal wept rust. It seemed the condition would be met, but the messengers came upon a giantess named Thok in a dark cave who refused to shed a single tear. "Let Hel hold what she has," the giantess snarled, and so Balder remained in the underworld. The giantess was, of course, Loki in another disguise. This story underscores the ultimate law of Helheim, a finality that not even the gods can overturn. Once the cold mist closes around a soul, it does not let go. The chilling finality of Helheim stands in stark contrast to another northern tradition, one where the afterlife shimmered with magic just beyond the veil of the mortal world. For the Celts, the realm of the dead was not a subterranean kingdom of shadows, but a parallel universe of breathtaking beauty known as the Otherworld. This was Anon in Welsh myth, a land of lavish feasts and youthful vitality, and Tyr na an Og in Irish tales, the land of eternal youth. It was an island that appeared through the ocean mist, a sudden doorway in a burial mound, or a path through a deep, enchanted forest. This realm was not a reward for a virtuous life, but a place of invitation and adventure, often beckoning heroes and poets with its timeless allure. The peril was never in reaching it, but in the heartbreaking impossibility of ever truly returning. One of the most famous voyages is the story of Bran mac Febble. One day, Bran found a silver branch from an otherworldly tree laden with white blossoms. A woman from the otherworld appeared, singing to him of Tyr na an Og, a land without sorrow, decay, or death, where happiness lasted forever and music played from trees. Compelled by her song, Bran gathered his crew and set sail across the western sea. After what seemed like only 2 days, they arrived at the glorious island, where they feasted and reveled for what felt like a year. Yet a homesickness grew in Bran's men, and despite warnings, they convinced him to sail for home. As they approached the coast of Ireland, the people on the shore saw a stranger in a curious boat and called out, asking who they were. Bran shouted his name, but the people replied that the only Bran they knew was a hero from their ancient legends who had sailed west and vanished centuries ago. In that moment, one of Bran's men, desperate to touch his homeland, leaped from the boat onto the shore. The instant his feet touched the earth, he crumbled into a pile of dust, for he was not a year older but centuries old. Bran and his crew could only turn their ship around and sail back into the mist, forever lost to the mortal world. This tragic time dilation is echoed even more poignantly in the tale of Oisin, the great warrior poet of the Fianna. He fell in love with Niamh of the golden hair, a princess of Tyr na an Og, and together they rode her white horse across the waves to her homeland. There, Oisin lived in bliss for 300 years, though to him it felt like only 3. A deep longing for Ireland and his old companions eventually gripped him. Niamh, fearful, allowed him to return on her magical white horse, but gave him one absolute command: he must not let his feet touch the soil of mortal earth. Oisin returned to Ireland to find the forts of the Fianna in ruins and his people long forgotten, their deeds now only old songs. While traveling, he saw a group of men struggling to lift a massive stone. Moved to help them, he leaned down from his saddle, but as he did, his girth strap snapped. He tumbled from the horse, and the moment his aged body touched the ground, the 300 years he had lived caught him in an instant. The young hero withered into an old, blind man, and the magical horse vanished, leaving him stranded in a time that was no longer his. These stories reveal a profound Celtic wisdom. The Otherworld was not a distant heaven, but a layer of reality intertwined with our own, accessible yet governed by its own immutable laws. The greatest danger was not a monstrous guardian or a stern judge, but the simple, relentless flow of time itself. To seek paradise was to risk losing your place in the world you left behind, a poignant reminder that every choice, even for eternal youth, carries an eternal cost. The Celtic Otherworld shimmered with a beauty that could break your heart, but far to the east, under the deep forests and wide rivers of the Slavic lands, lay an underworld of a much darker and more primal nature. This was Nav, a cold, watery abyss that existed beneath the roots of the world tree. It was not a kingdom of ordered judgment or a paradise of feasts, but a raw, chthonic realm of damp earth, still waters, and potent magic. Its ruler was the formidable god Veles, a being of profound contradictions. He was the master of the underworld, yet also the protector of cattle, wealth, and the secrets of magic and art. This duality placed him in an eternal, cosmic conflict with Perun, the towering god of thunder, lightning, and law. Their struggle was the central drama of Slavic cosmology, a battle between the structured sky and the chaotic, fertile earth. Perun, high in his celestial realm, represented order, the clear sky, and the righteous power of the warrior. Veles, from his sunless domain below, embodied the untamed wilds, the hidden wealth of the earth, and the unpredictable forces of magic. In myth, Veles would often steal Perun's cattle or his family, provoking the thunder god's wrath. Perun would then chase Veles across the heavens, hurling his lightning bolts, until Veles was driven down into the depths of Nav, hiding beneath a great stone or at the roots of the world tree. This cycle of theft, pursuit, and defeat was not a story of good versus evil, but of two necessary powers locked in an endless dance, maintaining the balance of the world itself. But the realm of Nav was not just the home of a powerful god. It was also the dwelling place of the restless dead, spirits known as Navki. These were the souls of those who had died a premature or violent death, or those who had not received a proper burial. They were not malevolent by nature, but they were trapped between worlds, filled with a profound sadness and a thirst for the life they had lost. On certain nights, particularly during the spring festival of Rusalnaya week, these spirits were believed to rise from their watery graves in rivers and lakes. They would appear as beautiful, pale women with long, flowing green hair, dancing in moonlit meadows and forest clearings. To encounter a Navka was perilous. Drawn by the vitality of the living, they might ask a young man a riddle or challenge him to a dance. If he failed to answer or could not match their endless stamina, they would tickle him to death, drawing out his life force with their eerie laughter. This was not born of malice, but of a desperate, lonely envy. To protect themselves, Slavic villagers developed intricate rituals of appeasement. They would leave offerings of cloth, bread, and honey at the water's edge. They weighed special wreaths of flowers and set them afloat on the rivers as gifts for the Navki. Fences were built around cemeteries not just to mark the land, but to symbolically contain the dead. And on the nights when the veil was thin, people would avoid swimming or even walking near bodies of water altogether. These practices reveal a worldview where the underworld was not a distant, sealed kingdom. It was a damp, breathing presence just below the surface of the familiar world, a realm whose sorrowful inhabitants could, and did, return to walk among the living, demanding remembrance and respect from those who still enjoyed the warmth of the sun. The damp sorrow of the Slavic underworld gives way to a system of cosmic justice so precise it operates like a divine machine. In the vast tapestry of Hindu belief, the afterlife is not a single, final destination, but a critical junction in an endless cycle of birth, death, and rebirth known as samsara. The underworld here is Naraka, a complex and temporary purgatory where souls are sent to atone for the specific sins of their most recent life. This is not a place of eternal damnation, but a realm of severe and exact correction. Presiding over this entire process is Yama, the first mortal to die and thus the king of the dead. He is a stern, impartial judge, often depicted with green skin, red eyes, and carrying a noose to gather souls. But Yama does not work from memory. By his side stands his record keeper, Chitragupta, a divine bureaucrat of immense importance. It is said that Chitragupta meticulously documents every single action, thought, and word of every human being throughout their life. When a soul stands before Yama's throne, Chitragupta presents his exhaustive ledger, leaving no deed, good or evil, unaccounted for. The judgment is then rendered with mathematical precision. Your karma, the accumulated weight of your actions, dictates your sentence, and Naraka is not one uniform hell, but a collection of many, each designed for a particular transgression. There is a hell for thieves where they are forced to embrace red-hot iron statues. There is a hell for liars where their tongues are pulled out repeatedly. Those who abused others might be pierced by thorns or crushed by stones, their suffering directly mirroring the pain they caused. The duration of this punishment is meticulously calculated, lasting until the negative karma from those sins is fully exhausted. It is a painful but purposeful purification. Once the debt is paid, the soul is reborn into a new life, its slate wiped clean, ready to begin another round in the cycle of samsara. Yet this cycle itself is seen as the root of all suffering. The ultimate goal in Hinduism is not to achieve a pleasant rebirth, but to escape the wheel entirely. This liberation is called moksha. It is a state of profound realization where the individual soul understands its fundamental oneness with the ultimate reality, Brahman. It is the end of all desire, all ignorance, and all karma. Achieving moksha means the soul is no longer bound to a physical body, no longer subject to the judgments of Yama or the torments of Naraka. It is a return to the source, a final shattering of the illusion of separateness that defines earthly existence. So while Naraka serves as a severe school for the soul, moksha is the graduation into eternal, limitless freedom. How does one navigate such a complex cosmic system? The answer lies in a guidebook for the dead, a Tibetan text designed to be read aloud to a soul at the moment of its greatest confusion. That guidebook is the Bardo Thodol, known to the West as the Tibetan Book of the Dead. It describes a journey through the Bardo, a liminal space of profound possibility and terror that unfolds in the 49 days between one life and the next. This is not a permanent underworld, but a fleeting, critical state of consciousness where the soul stands at a crossroads, its entire future hanging in the balance. The text is not meant to be read as a story, but to be recited into the ear of a person who has just died, a spiritual map to help them navigate the bewildering experiences of the afterlife. The journey begins with a moment of overwhelming clarity. In the first few days after death, the soul is presented with a blinding, pure light known as the clear light of reality. This is the ultimate truth, the nature of the universe laid bare, a chance for immediate liberation from the cycle of rebirth. But for almost everyone, the experience is too vast, too terrifying. The soul, still clinging to the illusion of a separate self, recoils and flees from this radiant emptiness, and then the visions begin. As the soul retreats, its own mind projects a spectacular and terrifying panorama. Over the following weeks, a sequence of 100 deities manifests. The first to appear are the peaceful deities, radiating compassion and serene beauty. They emerge from the heart of the universe, shining with brilliant light. But again, the untrained mind, conditioned by fear and desire, often misinterprets this divine display. The soul may see these beings as threatening or simply turn away, seeking more familiar, comforting forms. Then comes the second week, and the visions shift dramatically. The wrathful deities now emerge, a horrifying assembly of beings with flaming hair, animal heads, and garlands of skulls. They dance in a whirlwind of cosmic energy, their roars echoing with the sound of 1,000 thunderstorms. To a mind steeped in aggression and aversion, these figures appear as demons seeking to torment and destroy. Yet the Bardo Thodol instructs the listener to recognize a profound secret. These terrifying, wrathful deities are not external monsters. They are merely the peaceful deities in another form, and both are nothing more than reflections of the soul's own mind. The entire Bardo is a grand illusion, a dream generated by one's own karma and mental habits. The fundamental instruction whispered to the deceased is simple, yet it requires a lifetime of preparation to achieve. Do not be afraid. Recognize the lights and the deities as your own projections. If you can understand that you are witnessing the contents of your own consciousness, you can achieve liberation in that very instant. But if you cannot, the pull of karma becomes irresistible. The soul, driven by its attachments and aversions, begins to search for a new body, a new life. It is drawn toward visions of couples in intimacy, and depending on its karma, it will feel attraction or repulsion toward one of the parents, thus determining its next incarnation. A mind filled with generosity and compassion might be drawn into a fortunate human life. A mind clouded by jealousy and anger might perceive only frightening places, leading it into an existence of suffering. The 49-day journey of the Bardo is a race against the soul's own conditioning, a final, fleeting opportunity to wake up from the dream of existence before being cast back into the wheel of samsara. It is an underworld not of fire and brimstone, but of pure mind, where the only judge is the self, and the only prison is one's own ignorance. While the Tibetan Bardo is a journey through the mind, the Chinese vision of the afterlife is a journey through the ultimate civil service. This is Diyu, the underworld, a sprawling subterranean bureaucracy that perfectly mirrored the immense imperial administration of ancient China. Upon death, a soul does not simply face a single judge, but must navigate a labyrinth of courts, each with its own specialized officials, led by the 10 Yama kings. Your first stop is not a final judgment, but something more like a processing center. Here, the primary judge is King Yama himself, a figure borrowed from Hindu tradition but fully integrated into the Chinese system. He reviews the ledger of your life, a book meticulously kept by 2 celestial scribes who followed you everywhere, one on each shoulder. The man on your left recorded your every bad deed, while the one on your right noted every good action. Their accounts are presented to King Yama, who makes the initial assessment and directs your soul to the appropriate court for sentencing. This is not about eternal damnation, but about justice, balance, and the potential for redemption. The soul then begins its arduous passage through the 10 courts of hell, each presided over by its own Yama king and focused on punishing specific types of wrongdoing. The journey is a terrifyingly systematic process of purification. In the first court, King Qin Guang judges the general gravity of your sins. In the second court, King Chu Jiong presides over the hell of ice for those guilty of corruption and exploitation. The third court, under King Song Dai, deals with deceit and disrespect, and so it continues through courts that punish murder, theft, and slander. The punishments are vividly literal, designed to fit the crime with poetic and gruesome precision. A dishonest merchant who used false scales might be dismembered. A gossip who destroyed reputations could have their tongue ripped out repeatedly. There is a hell for tax evaders, a hell for ungrateful children, and a hell for those who wasted food. Yet even in this grim bureaucratic maze, there is a profound mechanism for hope. The living hold the power to intervene on behalf of the deceased. Through rituals performed by Taoist or Buddhist priests, families could file petitions in the underworld, much like submitting an appeal to a higher court. They could burn spirit money, known as joss paper, to bribe the officials and ease their ancestors' passage. They could commission masses to be sung, transferring merit to the soul suffering in Diyu. The most powerful act was the performance of the Blood Bowl Sutra, a ritual intended to save mothers from a specific punishment for the pollution of childbirth. This belief created a powerful, reciprocal bond between the living and the dead, where filial piety did not end at the grave. A soul's time in any one court was not infinite, typically lasting a set number of years before moving on to the next judgment. After cycling through the courts and enduring the necessary punishments, a soul would finally arrive at the 10th court, presided over by King Yuan, the king of the Wheel of Transformation. It is here that the final decision is made. Your purified soul is led to the terrace of Old Man Meng, where you are given a bowl of the broth of oblivion. This magical soup erases all memories of your past life and your time in the hells. With a clean slate, you are then sent to be reborn, your next life determined by the final balance of your karmic ledger. Diyu, therefore, is not a final destination, but a vast, painful, and meticulously fair processing plant for the soul, where the living and the dead remain connected in a cycle of judgment, punishment, and merciful release. That intricate bureaucracy of Diyu stands in sharp contrast to a far more primal and terrifying underworld from Japanese mythology. In the Shinto tradition, the land of the dead is known as Yomi, a realm of eternal night and putrefaction. It is not a place of moral judgment, but one of profound spiritual pollution, a contamination so absolute that contact with it forever stains both gods and mortals. The story that defines this grim realm is the heartbreaking tale of the creator deities Izanagi and Izanami. After giving birth to the islands of Japan and many of its gods, Izanami died while bringing the fire god into the world. Grief-stricken, her husband Izanagi made a desperate decision. He would descend into Yomi to bring her back. His journey into the darkness reveals a world defined by decay. He finally found Izanami within her shadowy hall, and in the gloom she spoke to him from the shadows, begging him not to look upon her. She told him she had already eaten the food of Yomi and was bound to this land, but she would plead with the gods of the underworld for her release. She made him promise he would not look at her while she slept, but Izanagi, consumed by love and impatience, broke his vow. He took the single tooth of his comb, lit it as a torch, and stepped into the hall. The flickering light fell upon Izanami's form, and he saw a horrifying vision. His beautiful wife was now a rotting corpse, writhing with maggots, with 8 thunder gods rumbling in the putrefaction of her body. He screamed in terror and fled. Humiliated and enraged at his betrayal, Izanami shrieked and gave chase, commanding the foul hags of Yomi to pursue him. This was not just a broken promise, it was a catastrophic rupture. Izanagi's act of looking had exposed the true, polluting nature of death, and his flight became a race to seal the worlds apart. He tore the vine from his hair and threw it behind him, where it magically transformed into a cluster of wild grapes that the hags stopped to devour. When they continued their pursuit, he threw another comb, which sprouted into a thicket of bamboo shoots. But Izanami herself was still closing in. As he reached the boundary between Yomi and the land of the living, the even pass of Yomi, he pushed a massive boulder into the entrance, permanently blocking the gateway. From opposite sides of the stone, their final words were exchanged. Izanami declared, "My beloved lord, if you do this, I will each day strangle to death 1,000 of your people." Izanagi replied with unshakable resolve, "My beloved wife, if you do that, I will each day build 1,500 birthing huts." This stark exchange established the cosmic order. Death would forever claim 1,000 lives each day, but life would always answer with 1,500 new births. Izanagi then performed a ritual of purification, washing himself in a river to cleanse the filth of Yomi from his body. The waters that touched him gave birth to new deities, including Amaterasu, the sun goddess, from his left eye. This myth explains the foundational Shinto concepts of purity and pollution, or kegare. Death was not a moral failure, but a form of spiritual contamination that required rigorous cleansing rituals to restore balance. Izanagi's single glance did more than lose him his wife. It defined the unbridgeable chasm between the vibrant world of the living and the defiling stillness of the dead. This relentless finality of Yomi, sealed by a single stone, gives way to an underworld where the journey itself is the entire purpose. Far across the Pacific, the Aztec vision of the afterlife reserved a special fate for those who died ordinary deaths from sickness or old age. Their destination was Mictlan, the deepest region of the underworld, a place of utter stillness ruled by the skeletal lord and lady Mictlantecutli and Mictlantecuhtli. Getting there was not a simple voyage. It was a grueling 4-year odyssey through 9 distinct layers of increasing peril, a gauntlet designed to systematically erase every last trace of the soul's earthly existence. The journey began almost immediately after death. The soul would first have to cross a deep and rushing river, the Apanohuea. To do this, they needed the help of a small, reddish dog, a Zoloitscuintli, which had been cremated with them. This loyal companion would recognize its master's spirit and carry them safely across the treacherous waters. Without this faithful guide, the soul was lost forever, unable to even begin its journey. Once across, the path led to a place where 2 great mountains appeared to crash together continuously. The soul had to sprint through this narrow, shuddering gap at the precise moment the mountains drew apart, a test of timing and courage. Next came the third challenge, Itztapetl, the Obsidian Mountain. This was not a mountain to be climbed, but a slope of razor-sharp glass shards that had to be scaled, tearing at the soul's spectral form with every painful step. After the mountain came a frigid desert, a landscape of biting winds where the soul, now naked and vulnerable, was pierced by icy blasts that offered no shelter or warmth. This was followed by a 6th layer where arrows seemed to fly from nowhere, a relentless barrage that the soul had to dodge and endure. The 7th challenge was even more bizarre and terrifying, a place where the soul was attacked and devoured by wild beasts, only to be miraculously reconstituted to continue the journey, a cycle of destruction and renewal. The 8th layer was the place of the reversed hearts, a mysterious realm where the soul's own inner being was turned inside out, stripping away the last vestiges of its former identity. And finally, after 4 long years, the soul reached the 9th and final layer, Temaminaloyan. Here, they had to pass through a wind so sharp it was made of obsidian knives, a final, cleansing cut that severed all remaining connection to the life they once knew. Arriving in the presence of Mictlantecutli and Mictlantecuhtli, the soul did not find punishment or reward, only silent, eternal oblivion. This complete dissolution was the goal, the final release from the toil of existence. The entire arduous journey served a single purpose: to break down the soul layer by layer, challenge by challenge, until nothing was left, returning the individual essence to the cosmic stillness from which it came. It was a 4-year funeral rite where the soul actively participated in its own unraveling. How could a culture that celebrated the sun and life create such a stark and arduous afterlife? The answer lies in the Aztec worldview, where death was not an enemy but a necessary part of the cosmic balance, a return to the source that made new life possible. The Aztec journey to dissolution was a solitary trial, but the Mayan underworld of Xibalba was a court of cruel and cunning hosts. Its name translates to the place of fright, and its rulers were masters of illusion and pain. The twin lords, 1 death and 7 death, presided over a pantheon of disease gods and spectral beings, delighting in the suffering of any mortal foolish enough to enter their domain. Their primary amusement was a deadly ball game, an echo of the sacred sport played by the gods in the world above, but here it was a rigged contest ending only in sacrifice. They did not conquer with brute force, but with a series of deceptive tests designed to break both body and spirit. A visitor would first be invited to sit upon a searing hot stone bench, disguised as a place of honor. They would then be offered a fragrant bouquet of flowers that concealed razors within its petals. The final test was the dark house, a chamber of absolute blackness where unseen dangers lurked, a perfect metaphor for the psychological torment the lords preferred. This was the fate that befell the first set of hero twins, 1 Hunahpu and 7 Hunahpu, who were lured to Xibalba for playing their ball game too loudly. They failed these tests and were sacrificed, their heads hung in a calabash tree as a warning. But their story did not end there. From that tree, the skull of 1 Hunahpu spit into the hand of a daughter of a Xibalban lord, impregnating her and setting the stage for the ultimate revenge. She gave birth to a second set of twins, Hunahpu and Expalank, who were destined from birth to confront the lords of the underworld. Aware of their father's fate, they deliberately played the ball game over his buried court, inviting the summons from Xibalba. Yet they were prepared. When the messengers of the lords arrived with the summons, the twins placed a tail feather from a macaw on the messenger's head, allowing them to spy on the Xibalbans and learn their secrets. Their journey to the underworld was a masterclass in reverse psychology and trickery. They deliberately failed the initial tests, but only to set a larger trap. They allowed themselves to be sacrificed in the House of Bats, only to reassemble themselves and return stronger and more cunning. Their greatest feat was the ball game itself. They played the lords but lost the match on purpose, offering themselves for sacrifice. In a grand theatrical performance, they allowed one twin to be dismembered and his bones ground into powder and thrown into a river. The Xibalbans cheered, believing their victory complete. But then, to their astonishment, the twins regenerated, leaping from the waterhole and more powerful than before. They then performed their ultimate trick, sacrificing a dog and bringing it back to life, then doing the same with each other, dying and resurrecting before the astonished eyes of the death gods. The lords of Xibalba, especially 1 Death and 7 Death, were utterly captivated. They begged the twins, "Do it to us, sacrifice us," and the twins with cold finality obliged. But when they sacrificed the lords of death, they did not bring them back. They left them dead, broken forever, and stripped Xibalba of its power to torment the innocent. The victory of Hunahpu and Expalank was not the destruction of the underworld, but its subjugation. They rose to become the sun and the moon, while the remaining Xibalbans were relegated to only afflicting those who lived wicked lives. This myth transformed the Mayan underworld from a random place of terror into a realm of moral consequence, where cleverness and courage could ultimately triumph over the deepest darkness. For the Polynesian voyagers, death itself was a final journey across the sea. Their cosmos held 2 powerful destinations for the soul, the ancestral homeland of Hawaii and the divine underworld of Pulatu. These were not always separate places, but intertwined realms of origin and return, often envisioned as distant, mystical islands across the western horizon. Hawaii was the legendary homeland from which all life sprang, the place where the great migration canoes first launched to settle the Pacific Islands. It was a physical and spiritual route, a paradise of plenty and the source of life itself. After death, the spirit was believed to embark on a dangerous voyage back to this ancestral heartland. The journey was fraught with perils. The spirit had to navigate a treacherous path, avoiding the clutches of predatory demons and overcoming supernatural obstacles. It was a test of the soul's worth and knowledge, where only those who remembered the old chants and traditions could find their way. Success depended on the guidance of ancestral spirits, who would appear as shimmering lights or familiar forms to lead the wayward soul safely home. To reach Hawaii was to achieve a state of blissful rest among one's own people, a return to the source. But another realm awaited those of higher status or divine favor, the glorious Pulatu. This was the underworld kingdom of the great god Limu, a true paradise of fragrant flowers, ever-bearing fruit trees, and constant celebration. It was a place of perfect beauty and eternal peace, where heroes and chiefs feasted with the gods. The path to Pulatu was even more perilous, requiring the soul to first pass through a place of trial and judgment. In some traditions, the spirit confronted a fearsome goddess, Hainui Tipo, the Great Lady of Night. She was the guardian of the threshold, and she would test each soul to determine its final destination. The journey did not end upon arrival, for the spirits in both Hawaii and Pulutu remained deeply connected to the world of the living. They could send their mana, their spiritual power, to aid their descendants, influencing the fortunes of fishing, farming, and war. This created a powerful, unbroken bond across the Vale, where the living honored the dead with offerings and chants, and the dead in their paradisiacal islands watched over the living. This cycle of voyage and return mirrored the Polynesians' own epic seafaring, turning death into the ultimate navigation, a final test of courage and memory under the vast, starry sky of the Pacific. The Polynesian soul's final voyage across the sea finds a powerful echo in the ancient landscapes of Australia, where the afterlife is not a distant realm but a return to the very earth beneath your feet. For Aboriginal cultures, death is a transition woven into the fabric of the dreamtime, the eternal, sacred era when ancestral spirits shaped the world. A person's spirit does not travel to a separate underworld, but journeys back into this living tapestry, becoming one with the ancestral forces that created the waterholes, the mountain ranges, and the desert plains. This final journey is guided by one of humanity's most beautiful and intricate spiritual maps, the songlines. These are not mere paths, but epic song cycles that crisscross the continent, each one a living narrative that describes the route and actions of a specific ancestral being during the dreamtime. The songs are a detailed geographical and spiritual guide, encoding the location of water sources, landmarks, and sacred sites. In life, people learn these songs, and in death, it is believed their spirit follows the melody of their ancestral songline to find its way home. The spirit might travel to a specific waterhole where its ancestor first emerged, or it may begin a final ascent to the sky world, a celestial domain often associated with the Milky Way, which many Aboriginal groups see as a river of stars filled with the campfires of the ancestors. Upon reaching its destination, the spirit does not vanish. It becomes part of the land itself, a rock formation, a cluster of trees, or a shimmer in the heat haze, watching over the living and infusing the world with its enduring presence. This belief creates a profound and unbreakable bond between people, their ancestors, and the environment. To harm the land is to desecrate the living body of the ancestors and risk the spiritual well-being of all. The songline ensures that even in death, no one is ever truly lost, for every spirit has a song to guide it home, and every landmark sings the story of its own creation. But the warmth of the dreamtime is a world away from the frozen shores of the Arctic, where survival depends on the sea's harsh mercy. Here, the Inuit underworld is not a land of fire, but of ice, a purgatory known as Adlivan. This is a desolate, frozen realm located beneath both the sea and the land, a place of bitter winds where souls are sent to be purified for a year before moving on to a more peaceful rest. The journey to Adlivan is itself a trial, as souls must navigate a treacherous, icy path and cross a calving glacier that groans and shatters with the voices of the dead. Yet the true ruler of this domain holds power not just over the dead, but over the living as well. She is Sedna, the mother of the sea, a goddess of immense power and profound sorrow. Her story is one of betrayal that shaped the world. Sedna was once a beautiful maiden, but her father, in a fit of fear or greed, threw her from his kayak during a storm. As she clung to the side, he chopped off her fingers one by one until she sank into the freezing depths. Her severed fingers transformed into the first seals, walruses, and whales, and she herself became the mighty goddess who commands all marine life. Now she resides at the bottom of the sea, her hair tangled and matted, surrounded by the animals she created. The Inuit people's survival hinges on Sedna's mood. When she is content, she releases the sea creatures from the vast pool within her dwelling, allowing hunters to find success. But when she is angered, often by the breaking of taboos or a lack of respect from the people, she gathers her hair, tangling the animals within it and causing famine. The seas grow stormy and the hunt fails. In these times of crisis, the community turns to its most powerful spiritual figure, the Angakok or shaman. Only the shaman possesses the strength to undertake the dangerous journey to Adlavon. In a deep trance, his spirit descends through the icy waters, past guarding spirits to reach Sedna's dark abode. There he must perform a delicate and arduous task. He must comb the tangles from Sedna's long, matted hair, soothing her anger and calming her restless spirit. This act of care and devotion is not just a physical cleaning, it is a spiritual apology, a plea for forgiveness on behalf of all the people. As he combs, he untangles the animals trapped in her hair, freeing them to return to the hunters. The shaman's successful return to his body signals that balance has been restored, and the community can hope for the sea's bounty once more. This entire cycle reveals a world view where the boundary between life and death, humanity and nature is thin as ice. The underworld is not a distant threat, but a force that directly controls daily survival, and its goddess must be appeased not with fear, but with respect and a shaman's courageous compassion. How does a culture envision an underworld when their entire existence is a struggle against the elements? That final journey across the ice leads us to a desert realm where the soul encounters a bridge that is also a perfect mirror. Our final myth takes us to ancient Persia and the Zoroastrian vision of the Chinvat Bridge, the bridge of the separator. This is not a physical structure, but a spiritual one, a manifestation of the soul's own conscience after the 3 days following death. During this time, the soul remains near the body, reflecting on the life just lived. Then, it must begin its journey to face its ultimate truth. The soul arrives at the bridge to find a terrifying and beautiful sight. Stretching over a deep, bottomless abyss, the bridge itself is neutral, a potential that awaits activation. The soul is met by its own Dina, a divine embodiment of its inner self, often appearing as a beautiful maiden for the righteous or a foul hag for the wicked. This is the soul's own spiritual record made visible. Then comes the true judgment, not by a distant god, but by the cosmic forces of order. The soul's thoughts, words, and deeds are placed on a giant scale, weighed against the feather of divine truth. There is no deception here, no celestial bureaucracy to navigate. The soul stands utterly exposed before its own choices. For the soul whose good deeds outweigh the bad, a miracle occurs. The Chinvat Bridge transforms, widening into a glorious, fragrant path, 9 spears across. The beautiful Dina takes its hand and guides it across into the House of Song, a paradise of everlasting light and music in the presence of the wise Lord Ahura Mazda. But for the soul weighed down by lies, violence, and evil, the bridge becomes a nightmare. It narrows instantly, sharpening to the edge of a razor blade. The soul, confronted by its own hideous Dina, loses its footing and plunges from that impossible edge. The fall is not into a pre-existing hell of fire and demons. Instead, the wicked soul descends into a hell of its own making, a place of isolation, darkness, and self-inflicted torment that is the direct consequence of its own life's corruption. This powerful image suggests that our deepest hell is not a punishment imposed from without, but the inescapable reality of the person we have chosen to become. The Chinvat Bridge offers no arbitrary sentence, only a stark and personal revelation, forcing us to ask what our own Dina would look like and which path our choices have already begun to build. Rivers carve the final border between our world and the next. Across cultures, from the murky Greek Styx to the treacherous Aztec Apanohuea, these waterways serve as the ultimate symbol of irreversible change. Once crossed, there is no return. But why is this aquatic boundary so universal? The answer lies in the river's dual nature. It is a physical barrier, yes, but also a powerful metaphor for the soul's own journey from the known to the unknowable. The flowing water represents the passage of time and the finality of death itself, a current that only flows one way. To cross it, you cannot go alone. You always need a guide, a key, or a toll. This universal need reveals a profound human anxiety about navigating the ultimate unknown without a map. For the Greeks, the ferryman Charon demanded a single coin for passage across the Styx, a payment that ensured the soul did not wander the shores for a century. This was not a bribe, but a sacred fare, a final transaction that completed the funeral rites of the living. Without that obol placed in the mouth of the deceased, the journey was impossible. The Egyptians faced a similar trial, but their celestial river was the Lily Lake, a deceptively calm expanse the sun god Ra navigated each night in his bark. For a human soul, crossing this water was the final test in the duat. Only those who could answer the challenges of the ferryman and prove their worth were allowed aboard, their passage a reward for a life lived in truth. The Mesopotamian Huber River was even more forbidding. This was not just a boundary but a place of cosmic origin and terror, a primordial saltwater stream that the goddess Tiamat herself used to create monsters. To cross the Huber was to be stripped of identity, a process mirrored in Inanna's descent, where each of the 7 gates took a piece of her divine power. And for the Aztecs, the very first challenge of the 4-year journey through Mictlan was the river Apanohuaya. Here, the soul relied on a Zoloid-scuently dog, cremated with its master, to carry it safely across the rushing waters. Without that loyal companion, the soul was lost before its arduous purification could even begin. Each of these rivers, though separated by continents and millennia, tells the same story. They are the liquid gates of the soul, and the guide or payment required to cross them reflects a universal human truth. We are all afraid of getting lost on the other side. Justice itself seems to stand trial across these underworlds, its face changing with every culture it judges. The stern, impartial scales of Mat in Egypt demanded a life in perfect balance, where the consequence of failure was not torment but annihilation by the devourer. This was a cosmic and deeply personal reckoning. In China, this single moment of judgment exploded into a sprawling, 10-court bureaucracy, where specialized Yama kings punished specific sins with poetic precision. Justice here was not swift but systematic, a slow grind through a divine civil service that the living could influence with prayers and spirit money. The Hindu and Buddhist Yama presents another model entirely. A single, fearsome king of the dead who consults an exhaustive karmic ledger kept by his scribe Chitragupta. His judgment is mathematically precise, sentencing souls to the specific Naraka hell that matches their sins, not for eternity, but only for as long as their negative karma requires. And then there is the Greek tribunal of Minos, Rhadamanthys, and Aeacus, 3 former mortal kings who render a swift, final verdict that sends souls to the bliss of Elysium, the gloom of Asphodel, or the torments of Tartarus. What do these 4 different judges reveal? The Egyptian system prized inner truth and cosmic harmony above all. The Chinese vision reflected a society built on immense, orderly administration. Yama's court shows a universe governed by the unbreakable, quantifiable law of cause and effect. The Greek judges, meanwhile, suggest a belief that justice is best dispensed by a panel of wise rulers who have themselves experienced human life. The very nature of the divine judge is a mirror, reflecting each culture's deepest convictions about what is fair, what is orderly, and who is ultimately qualified to weigh a human soul. Perhaps the most haunting melody ever played was the one that silenced the underworld itself. Orpheus, the greatest musician of Greek myth, descended into Hades not with a sword but with a lyre. His love, Eurydice, had been bitten by a viper and taken to the land of the dead. His music was so beautiful, so filled with genuine grief, that it charmed the ferryman Charon, soothed the 3-headed hound Cerberus, and even moved the stone-hearted king Hades to grant his request. Eurydice could follow him back to the world of the living, but on one absolute condition: he must not look back at her until they had both reached the sunlight. It was a journey of perfect faith. Orpheus led the way, listening for the faint footsteps of his beloved behind him as they climbed the dark path. The air grew warmer, a sliver of light appeared in the distance, and in that moment of desperate hope, doubt seized him. Was she still there? Had it all been a cruel trick? Just as he crossed into the living world, he turned and his eyes met hers. For a single, heartbreaking second, he saw her, and then she was pulled back into the shadows, her whisper of farewell lost forever. His one glance, born of love and fear, shattered the only chance he had. We see this same fatal flaw in the story of Izanagi and his desperate race from the Japanese underworld of Yomi. He had broken the taboo. He had looked upon his wife Izanami in her state of decay. As he fled her wrath, her shrieking pursuit closing in, he reached the boundary and blocked the entrance with a colossal boulder. They stood on opposite sides of that stone, the final seal between life and death. Their last exchange was not one of love, but of grim, cosmic bargaining. Izanami declared she would strangle 1,000 of his people each day. Izanagi countered, vowing to build 1,500 birthing huts. Life would always outpace death, but the chasm between them was now permanent. His look had not just cost him his wife, it had defined the very nature of mortality for his entire people. Even the gods themselves are not immune to this cruel law. Recall the Norse god Hermod, riding for 9 nights through freezing darkness to beg for his brother Baldur's release from hell. The goddess Hel offered a seemingly simple condition. If everything in all the worlds would weep for the fallen god, he could return. And the universe did weep, trees, stones, and metal, until the messengers found one solitary giantess in a cave who refused. That giantess was Loki in disguise, and her refusal sealed Baldur's fate. In this case, the condition was fulfilled by all of creation, yet it was still broken by a single act of malice. The taboo against Baldur's return was absolute, and not even the collective grief of the cosmos could overturn it once that one voice held out. These 3 stories from Greece, Japan, and the Norse realms form a tragic chorus on the same theme. Each hero, driven by profound love, dares to challenge the finality of death. Each is granted a conditional, almost impossible chance, a single rule that must not be broken. And in a moment of very human weakness, a flicker of doubt, a surge of fear, or the interference of a trickster, that rule is shattered. The consequence is always the same. The door to the underworld slams shut, and the lesson is etched into the fabric of reality. The dead cannot return. This is not a punishment for wickedness, but a fundamental principle of existence. The failure of Orpheus, Izanagi, and Hermod teaches us that the greatest power in the universe is not love or courage or even divine will, but the simple, unyielding law of separation. The border between life and death is maintained not by monsters, but by the fragility of our own trust. These underworlds are not just random collections of fears and hopes, they are perfect mirrors of the societies that built them. Look closely at the kingdom of Hades, where the silent, ghostly masses wander the asphodel meadows. This vast grey plain of forgetfulness directly reflects the life of an ordinary ancient Greek farmer, a cyclical existence of labor, harvest, and quiet endurance, where the greatest aspiration was often simply to avoid catastrophe. The promise of the Elysian Fields was a paradise reserved for heroes and those favored by the gods, a direct echo of a culture that celebrated legendary figures and their glorious deeds. Even the seasonal rhythm of Persephone's return, which brings spring, is a myth born from an agricultural society that lived and died by the harvest. The earth's fertility was a matter of life and death, so it made sense that the very goddess of the underworld held the key to life on the surface. Now shift your gaze to the frozen Norse realm of Helheim. This was the destination for all who died of sickness or old age, a cold and final rest that stands in stark contrast to the glorious, mead-soaked halls of Valhalla. This stark division in the afterlife is a perfect reflection of a warrior culture constantly under threat. In such a society, the highest honor was a heroic death in battle, a ticket to Odin's eternal army. A peaceful death was by comparison mundane, warranting a quiet, chilly eternity. The afterlife was not about moral virtue, but about how you met your end, a direct projection of Viking societal values onto the cosmos. Perhaps the clearest mirror of all is China's sprawling Diyu. With its 10 courts of hell, each with a specialized Yama king judging specific crimes like tax evasion or disrespect to parents, the underworld is a perfect replica of the immense imperial bureaucracy that governed every aspect of life. The ability to file appeals through rituals and bribe officials with spirit money reflects a very real-world understanding of how to navigate a vast, rigid system. The entire process feels less like a divine revelation and more like navigating the most daunting government office imaginable, because that was the daily reality for the people who imagined it. From the heroic feasts of Valhalla to the endless paperwork of Diyu, every culture's vision of the world below reveals its deepest anxieties, its highest ideals, and the unspoken rules that held its world together. These myths were not just stories, they were blueprints for eternity, and we have found their physical traces buried deep in the earth. The archaeology of death gives us a tangible window into how ancient cultures prepared for the underworld journey, turning abstract beliefs into stunning artifacts. In Egypt, the most personal guide was the Book of the Dead, a collection of spells and illustrations written on papyrus scrolls and placed in the coffin. This was not a book of doctrine, but a practical survival manual for the soul, providing the exact words to say at the weighing of the heart ceremony and the correct names of the demons to pass safely through the Jewat. A wealthy individual might commission a beautifully illustrated copy, ensuring they were equipped for every challenge in the afterlife. Their tombs in the Valley of the Kings were even more elaborate, entire subterranean palaces filled with furniture, food, and gold, a physical recreation of the world they hoped to inhabit beyond the grave. Far to the north, the Norse sent their dead to sea, but in the most literal way. The Oseberg ship burial in Norway contained an entire Viking longship, dragged ashore and buried in a massive mound. Inside, 2 women were laid to rest with a breathtaking array of goods, from carved wooden carts and sleds to textiles and even sacrificed animals. This was not merely a display of wealth, it was a functional vessel for the journey to the afterlife, equipped with everything needed for whatever realm awaited, whether the frozen quiet of Helheim or the feasting halls of the gods. In China, the ultimate preparation for the afterlife was an army. The terracotta warriors, thousands of life-sized clay soldiers, stand in silent formation in the tomb complex of the first emperor, Qin Shi Huang. Each soldier has a unique face, and they are accompanied by chariots, horses, and weapons. This was not a symbolic gesture, it was a literal army intended to protect and serve the emperor in the next world, a stunning manifestation of the belief that the afterlife required the same power and authority as the earthly one. From the papyrus scroll in an Egyptian coffin to the planks of a buried Viking ship, these artifacts are more than just treasure, they are fossilized hope, the physical proof of humanity's enduring attempt to pack for the most important journey of all. Ancient underworlds have not remained buried in dusty tombs, they have found vibrant new life on our screens and in our stories. Modern pop culture has become a playground for these ancient myths, reimagining their rules and reshaping their landscapes for a contemporary audience. The underworld is no longer a distant, abstract threat. It is a dynamic setting for adventure, humor, and profound personal journeys. Disney's animated film Hercules presents a Hades who is less a stern god of the dead and more a fast-talking, scheming corporate executive. His realm is a fiery office of the damned, complete with bureaucratic minions and a desperate plan for a hostile takeover of Olympus. This portrayal transforms the ancient Greek concept of a fixed, judgmental kingdom into a system that can be cheated or overthrown, reflecting modern anxieties about power and ambition rather than the ancient fear of divine retribution. In beautiful contrast, Pixar's Coco offers a breathtaking vision of the Aztec-inspired land of the dead. This is not the silent, dissolving Mictlan of old, but a vibrant, bustling metropolis populated by skeletal ancestors. The final death here is not a 4-year journey of purification, but being forgotten by the living. This profound shift places the power of the afterlife directly into the hands of those still alive, turning memory into the most powerful currency of eternity. It is a deeply humanistic interpretation that celebrates family and legacy over fear and punishment. Video games have taken this interactivity even further, turning the underworld into a personal proving ground. The God of War series presents Hades as a brutal, monster-infested dungeon, a physical challenge for the player to conquer through sheer force. It emphasizes the terrifying landscape and its guardians, reducing the complex Greek judgment system to a series of obstacles for a superhuman hero to smash through. But the game Hades from Supergiant Games offers perhaps the most sophisticated modern reinterpretation. Here, the underworld is a dysfunctional yet strangely relatable family business. Zagreus, the son of Hades, is not a captive soul but a rebellious prince trying to escape to the surface. The Greek realms of Tartarus, Asphodel, and Elysium become levels in a roguelike game, their challenges reflecting the ancient themes of punishment and reward but framing them as a personal quest for identity and understanding. The game brilliantly weaves the original myths into its narrative, presenting the gods and heroes not as remote figures, but as flawed, talking characters with their own motivations and relationships. It preserves the structure of the ancient underworld while completely changing our relationship to it, transforming a place of final judgment into a home one can both fight against and ultimately reconcile with. Even literature continues to reinvent these spaces. In Rick Riordan's popular Percy Jackson series, the underworld is made accessible and navigable for modern demigods, complete with security guards and a waiting room filled with the spirits of those who died with unresolved issues. These contemporary retellings do more than just entertain. They act as a cultural conversation with the past. They ask new questions of the old myths. What if the underworld was not a final destination, but a place you could fight your way out of? What if its greatest terror was not punishment, but obscurity? By adapting the ancient rules, these stories keep the myths alive, allowing each new generation to find its own meaning in the shadowy realms that have captivated humanity for millennia. These ancient journeys into darkness may reflect a deeper, more personal voyage we all must undertake, a descent not into the earth, but into the hidden chambers of our own mind. The underworld is a powerful metaphor for the human unconscious, that vast, unseen part of ourselves where forgotten memories, repressed fears, and our most primal instincts reside. To cross its river is to venture beyond the light of our everyday awareness, and the trials faced there are the personal demons we must confront to become whole. This psychological descent forces a confrontation with the shadow self, the part of our personality that we deny or hide, often containing traits we consider shameful or weak. The myth of Inanna's descent is a perfect map for this internal process. Her passage through the 7 gates, where she is stripped of her crown, her jewels, and finally her robe, is not merely a punishment but a necessary dismantling of the ego. In the world above, she was the queen of heaven, defined by her power and status. To enter the underworld, she had to surrender every symbol of that identity. Psychologically, this is the painful but essential process of letting go of the persona, the mask we show the world, to face the raw, unfiltered truth of who we are underneath. When Ereshkigal fixes the eye of death upon her, it represents the terrifying moment of fully confronting this shadow, a confrontation that feels like a kind of death. The old self, built on pride and external validation, must perish before a more authentic self can be reborn. The trials of other underworlds echo this theme. The Greek hero in the Asphodel Meadows wanders in a fog of forgetfulness, much like we do when we refuse to examine our past traumas. The Mayan hero twins in Xibalba face deceptive houses of darkness and bats, symbolic of the confusing and frightening corners of our own psyche we are afraid to explore. Each challenge on the underworld journey, from outrunning crashing mountains to answering riddles from spirits, mirrors the internal work of overcoming addiction, healing from heartbreak, or finally acknowledging a long-buried truth. The goal of this perilous descent is never to remain in the darkness, but to achieve a return, what psychologists call integration. This is the moment of wisdom and wholeness, when we bring the lessons of the shadow self back into the light of our conscious lives. We do not eliminate our weaknesses or fears, but we learn to acknowledge them, understand their roots, and thereby rob them of their power to control us from the shadows. The rescued soul, or the hero who returns from the underworld, is forever changed, not because the journey was easy, but because it was harrowing. They have stared into the abyss within and have come back with a profound understanding that both the light and the dark are essential parts of who they are. So the next time you hear an ancient tale of a journey to the land of the dead, ask yourself not about the monsters lurking there, but about the hidden territories within your own mind. What gates must you pass through, and what part of yourself have you left waiting in the darkness, hoping to be seen and ultimately brought back home? But you do not have to make that journey alone. In every culture's vision of the end, there is a guide waiting in the shadows, a figure whose sole purpose is to lead the soul from one world to the next. These are the psychopomps, the conductors of the dead, and they are among the most essential yet overlooked figures in all of mythology. Their forms are as varied as the underworlds they serve, but their function is always the same: to provide a safe passage through the ultimate unknown. Without them, a soul could be lost forever, wandering the shores of a spectral river or falling prey to the predators of the afterlife. The Greek god Hermes, with his winged sandals and caduceus staff, was the original psychopomp. He was the divine messenger, equally at home on Olympus, on Earth, and in the gloomy halls of Hades. It was his duty to gently grasp the shades of the deceased and guide them down to the banks of the river Styx, delivering them into the bony hands of the ferryman Charon. He was a comforting presence, a familiar god who knew the way, making the terrifying transition just a little less lonely. In Egypt, this role fell to the jackal-headed Anubis. His animal form was no accident. Jackals were often seen prowling the edges of cemeteries, and so Anubis became the natural guardian of the threshold between life and death. He was the master of embalming, the one who prepared the body for its eternal journey, but his most sacred duty was to lead the soul by the hand into the Hall of Two Truths. He then performed the delicate, crucial task of placing the heart on the scale against the feather of Mot. Anubis was not the judge, but the essential facilitator of the entire judgment process, the steady guide who saw every soul through its most perilous moment. Far to the north, the psychopomps took on a more fierce and glorious aspect. The Valkyries of Norse myth were not merely choosers of the slain, they were the ultimate escorts for the most honored dead. These warrior maidens, riding through the storm clouds on their flying steeds, would descend to a bloody battlefield and select the bravest of the fallen. They did not bring fear, but honor, gently lifting the spirits of these elite warriors and carrying them straight to the golden halls of Valhalla. For a Viking, the sight of a Valkyrie was the highest reward, a divine taxi service to an eternal feast. And in the Aztec journey through Mictlan, the guide was not a god or a goddess, but a humble, loyal companion. The Xoloitzcuintli dog, a hairless breed often depicted in their art, was cremated alongside its master. The Aztecs believed this faithful animal would wait for its owner's spirit on the banks of the first great river, Apanohuaya. In that confusing and dangerous new landscape, the dog would recognize its beloved human and without hesitation carry the soul safely across the rushing water. Without this devoted psychopomp, the 4-year journey of purification could never even begin. These guides, whether majestic or mundane, reveal a profound and universal human hope. We have always feared getting lost in the dark, and so we populated that darkness with figures who know the path. The psychopomp is the ultimate expression of trust, a belief that even in the face of the great unknown, no one has to cross over all by themselves. Every underworld needs its sentinels, creatures forged not just to terrify, but to enforce the absolute laws of their domain. The most iconic of these is Cerberus, the colossal three-headed hound who guards the gate of the Greek Hades. His role is not to torment the dead who rightfully belong inside, but to ensure that no living soul enters and, more importantly, that no shade ever escapes. His very presence is a barrier, a living embodiment of the one-way journey. With a serpent for a tail and sometimes even snakes writhing from his mane, he is a composite of every primal fear, a perfect symbol of the impenetrable boundary between our world and the next. Only a handful of heroes ever got past him, and they did so not through brute force but through cunning or divine aid, proving that even the most terrifying guardian has rules that can be understood if not overcome. Where Cerberus guards the gate, other creatures serve as the executioners of divine justice. In the Egyptian Hall of Two Truths, the true terror was not the judgment of the gods, but the silent, patient beast waiting beside the scales. Ammit the Devourer was a chimera of the three most feared man-eaters known to the Egyptians, with the head of a crocodile, the forequarters of a lion, and the hindquarters of a hippopotamus. She did not growl or threaten, she simply waited. If a heart heavy with sin failed to balance against the feather of truth, there was no trial, no second chance. Ammit would consume the heart on the spot, and the soul would cease to exist, erased from all future existence. This was not punishment, it was annihilation, a fate far worse than any torment. Ammit was the ultimate enforcer of cosmic order, the final, irreversible consequence of a life lived out of balance. Some underworld beings were less judges and more brutal functionaries, relentless in their duties. The Mesopotamian Gala demons were such creatures. These faceless, terrifying beings, born from the underworld itself, had one primary function: to drag the dying and the dead down to the dust of Urkala. They were not susceptible to bribes or prayers. They could not be reasoned with. In the myth of Inanna's descent, it is the Gala who accompany her back to the world above, tasked with seizing a substitute to take her place in the underworld. They are a chilling representation of death's impersonal and inescapable grip, a force that does not hate but simply collects what is owed. Perhaps the most creatively malevolent gods, however, were the inhabitants of the Mayan Xibalba. The lords of this place of fright employed monsters that were as deceptive as they were deadly. Among them were the flying heads, severed heads that flew through the darkness, their entrails dangling below them like grotesque tails. These were not mere spooks, they were instruments of disease, spreading sickness with their foul breath. Then there was Camazotz, the death bat, a being that dwelled in the house of bats, a cave filled with razor-sharp, shrieking creatures. Camazotz itself could decapitate a hero with a single swipe of its blade-like nose. These entities were not guardians of a boundary, but active participants in the torment, reflecting the Mayan belief that the underworld was a place of active, cunning evil that had to be outsmarted, not just survived. What unites all these monstrous guardians, from the three-headed hound to the flying heads? They are not arbitrary horrors. Each one serves a precise purpose in the cosmic machinery of their respective afterlife. They are the teeth of divine law, the physical manifestation of consequences. They ensure that the sacred rules of the underworld, whether of finality, justice, or purification, are never, ever broken. They teach a simple, chilling lesson that the realms of the dead are not chaotic, but governed by a terrible and unforgiving order. This duality of reward and retribution was never just about the dead. It was a powerful tool to shape the world of the living. Across cultures, the promise of paradise and the threat of damnation created a cosmic incentive program, a divine enforcement of social and moral order. The blissful fields of Elysium were not for everyone in ancient Greece. They were reserved for heroes, the righteous, and those directly favored by the gods. This ideal of an eternal, sunny meadow where souls engaged in music and athletic contests reinforced the highest cultural values: courage, honor, and divine favor. It told the ordinary person that while a quiet, forgetful eternity in the asphodel meadows was likely, true glory in this life could purchase a better fate in the next. Similarly, the Norse Valhalla was the ultimate reinforcement of a warrior society's code. To feast and fight in Odin's golden hall was an exclusive reward for those who died sword in hand. This belief actively encouraged bravery on the battlefield, turning fear into fervor. In the East, the Buddhist Pure Lands offered a different kind of paradise, not of feasting but of perfect tranquility. These were realms created by enlightened beings like Amitabha Buddha, where souls could be reborn into an ideal environment to continue their spiritual progress without distraction. The promise was that sincere faith and virtuous conduct could secure a birth in a land of jeweled trees and gentle teachings, a powerful motivator for ethical living and devotion. Juxtaposed against these radiant rewards were the underworlds of pure punishment, designed to be so terrifying they would govern behavior for centuries. The Greek Tartarus was a prison of bronze and darkness for the most grievous offenders against the gods. Its most famous inmate, Sisyphus, was not punished for murder or theft, but for the ultimate sin of hubris, for trying to cheat death itself. His eternal, futile labor served as a stark, chilling lesson against overstepping mortal boundaries. The Hindu and Buddhist hells of Naraca present an even more precise system of retribution. This is not one hell, but many, each tailored to a specific transgression. A liar might have their tongue torn out repeatedly, while a corrupt judge could be forced to embrace a red-hot iron statue. The punishment is a direct karmic reflection of the crime, a brutal and exacting form of cosmic justice meant to purify the soul through pain. And then there is the Christian hell, a concept that evolved into a realm of eternal, conscious torment, often depicted as a lake of fire. This was the ultimate deterrent, a permanent destination for unrepentant sinners that made the stakes of moral and doctrinal obedience infinitely high. The vivid sermons and art depicting the agonies of hell were not just descriptions, they were psychological instruments aimed at the heart of the community, compelling conformity and piety through sheer terror. These visions of paradise and punishment were two sides of the same coin, a celestial carrot and stick that told people exactly how to live, what to fear, and what to worship. They transformed abstract morals into tangible, eternal consequences, ensuring that the laws of the community were written not just on stone tablets, but across the very landscape of eternity. The fear of being forgotten by the living is a terror that spans the globe, but so too does the profound human need to reach back across the veil. This is where myth met practice, where stories of the underworld were answered by rituals that built a bridge between the living and the dead. These festivals and ceremonies were not mere superstition. They were a vital dialogue with the departed, a way to offer comfort, seek guidance, and ensure that the memory of ancestors continued to shape the world. In ancient Greece, the Anthesteria was a three-day festival of deeply mixed emotions. It was a time when the spirits of the dead, the Kyrs, were believed to rise from the underworld and walk the streets of Athens. This was not a joyful reunion, but a dangerous and polluting event. People would chew buckthorn leaves and paint their doors with tar to ward off the roaming spirits. The first day, the Pythoia, involved opening the new wine jars and offering a portion to the god Dionysus, a celebration of life's vitality. But the second day, the Chose, was a somber affair. Each person drank their wine in silence and solitude, a private ritual in haunted homes, acknowledging the presence of the dead without inviting them in. By the third day, the Chaitroi, households would prepare a pot of cooked grains and offer it to the underworld god Hermes, not for consumption, but as a final meal to placate the spirits before forcefully telling them, out of doors, Kyrs, it is no longer Anthesteria. This festival perfectly captures the ancient tension, a desire to honor the dead while maintaining a firm boundary to keep their world from overwhelming the world of the living. The Romans approached this connection with a more orderly, family-focused reverence. The Parentalia was a 9-day festival in February dedicated strictly to the daimons, the benevolent spirits of one's own ancestors. This was a quiet, private time of remembrance. Families would journey to tombs outside the city walls, decorating them with flowers and garlands. They would offer simple gifts of wine, milk, honey, and bread directly at the gravesite, strengthening the bond with those who watched over the family's fortune. Temples were closed, marriages were forbidden, and public business halted, creating a solemn civic atmosphere of respect. This was not a time to fear the dead, but to nourish them, ensuring their continued goodwill and protection. The festival concluded with the Feralia, a public day of offering where the entire community collectively appeased any restless spirits, and then the Charistia, a joyful family feast that celebrated the living relatives and mended any quarrels, ensuring the family unit remained strong under the watchful eyes of the ancestors. This seamless blend of public duty and private devotion created a powerful sense of continuity where the dead remained active members of the family. A world away in Mexico, this connection explodes into a vibrant, celebratory art form. Dia de los Muertos, the Day of the Dead, is not a somber day of mourning but a joyous and colorful reunion. Rooted in both indigenous Aztec beliefs and Catholic traditions, it is a time when the veil between worlds is believed to be at its thinnest. Families build elaborate ofrendas or altars in their homes and at grave sites. These are not simple shrines but sensory feasts for the returning spirits. They are laden with marigold petals whose vibrant color and potent scent are thought to guide the souls home. Photographs of the departed are displayed alongside their favorite foods, a glass of water, and perhaps a bottle of their preferred drink. The air is sweet with the smell of pan de muerto, the bread of the dead, and sugar skulls, often inscribed with the names of the deceased, add a playful touch. Families gather in cemeteries, cleaning and decorating graves, sharing stories, singing songs, and having a picnic with the souls of their loved ones. It is a profound affirmation that death is a natural part of life, and that those who have passed on are never truly gone as long as they are remembered with love and celebration. In Japan, the Buddhist festival of Obon serves a similar purpose, focusing on the annual return of ancestral spirits to the family home. For 3 days in July or August, it is believed the spirits make the journey back to visit their living relatives. To welcome them, families clean their homes thoroughly and place offerings of fruit, rice, and vegetables on the Butsudan, the family altar. They light special chochin lanterns to guide the spirits and often build small horse-shaped vegetables to symbolize a quick arrival. The heart of Obon is the Bon Odori, a traditional folk dance performed in towns and villages. The circular, graceful dances are open to everyone, a community-wide celebration to welcome and entertain the ancestors. As the festival concludes, families accompany the spirits back to their world, often by floating lanterns down a river or out to sea. The sight of hundreds of tiny lights drifting into the darkness is a breathtakingly beautiful farewell, a promise to remember and welcome them again the following year. And from the ancient Celtic world comes Samhain, the festival that would eventually evolve into Halloween. Celebrated from October 31st to November 1st, Samhain marked the end of the harvest and the beginning of the dark, cold half of the year. It was a liminal time when the boundary between our world and the other world became dangerously thin. It was not just the honored ancestors who might return, but all manner of spirits and fairies, some of them malevolent. To protect themselves, the Celts would extinguish their hearth fires and relight them from a great communal bonfire around which the community gathered. They wore disguises and masks to confuse the harmful spirits, a practice that echoes in our modern-day costumes. Offerings of food and drink were left outside doors to appease the supernatural visitors. Yet it was also a time for divination, for looking into the future, as the thin veil was thought to make such glimpses possible. These 5 traditions, from the fearful silence of the Anasteria to the dancing skeletons of Dia de los Muertos, all served the same deep human purpose. They transformed the abstract, terrifying underworld into a place one could visit, even if just for a day. They gave the living a role to play in the cosmic order, a way to care for those who had passed on. In a world filled with mysteries, these rituals provided a map for the heart, a way to keep the beloved dead close, and a comforting assurance that the final journey was not one of utter separation, but a cycle of remembrance and return. This perilous crossing into the land of the dead is not just a fate for the common soul, but a quest reserved for the most determined heroes. Across cultures, we find a powerful, repeating story pattern, the Catabosses, a hero's deliberate descent into the underworld. This journey follows a hauntingly familiar rhythm, a map for navigating the ultimate unknown. It always begins with a call, a profound reason to brave the shadows. For Orpheus, it was the piercing grief of losing his beloved Eurydice, a love so strong it compelled him to challenge the laws of death itself. For the Trojan hero Aeneas, the call was a sacred duty, a mandate from the gods to seek a vision of Rome's future from his deceased father in the Elysian fields. The poet Dante's call was more personal, a spiritual crisis that sent him guided by the ghost of Virgil through the 9 concentric circles of hell. And for the Mayan hero twins, Hunahpu and Xbalanque, the call was one of vengeance and destiny, a need to confront the lords of Xibalba who had murdered their father. Each hero hears a summons they cannot ignore, setting them on a path from which many never return. The descent itself is a passage into a different reality, a crossing of thresholds that separates the living from the dead. Aeneas had to find the fabled golden bough to present as an offering to Proserpina, the queen of the underworld, before the Sibyl would even lead him to the cavern mouth that breathed miasma into the world above. Dante's descent began by passing through a gate inscribed with the terrifying words, "Abandon all hope, ye who enter here." This was not just a warning, but an ACTIVE Chinese letter that changed the very air around him. The Mayan twins had to navigate a steep, treacherous road down into Xibalba, a path designed to disorient and terrify any who dared walk it. These are not simple journeys downward, they are transitions into a realm governed by alien laws, where the familiar logic of the world above no longer applies. Once inside, the hero faces a gauntlet of trials specifically designed to break their spirit. For Orpheus, the trial was not combat, but the power of his own music, using it to charm the ferryman Charon and soothe the 3-headed watchdog Cerberus. His art became his shield and his key. Dante's trials were moral and visceral as he witnessed the precise, symbolic punishments of the damned in each circle of hell, forcing him to confront the nature of sin itself. The Mayan twins faced the deceptive tests of the Xibalban lords, from sitting on a searing hot stone bench to surviving a night in the House of Gloom and the House of Knives. These trials are a refining fire, testing the hero's courage, wisdom, and worthiness to proceed deeper into the heart of darkness. The pivotal moment in every Catabosses is the audience with the ruler of this shadowy domain. This is the climax of the journey, a confrontation with the ultimate authority of death. Orpheus stood before the thrones of Hades and Persephone, and with his lyre he did not demand but pleaded, his music so profoundly sad that it moved the hearts of the eternally unmovable. Aeneas finally found his father Anchises in the sunlit groves of Elysium, receiving not a prize to carry back, but a prophetic vision of the glorious lineage he would found. Dante came face to face with Satan himself, frozen in the ice at the very center of hell, a terrifying vision of utter spiritual emptiness. And the Mayan twins, after surviving every trap, stood before the Lord's 1 death and 7 death, not as supplicants, but as cunning players ready to turn the Lord's own love of trickery against them. This meeting is the purpose of the entire ordeal, whether it is to retrieve a loved one, gain essential knowledge, or defeat death on its own terms. But the quest is not over when the goal is in sight. The return is often the most treacherous part of the journey. The hero must make their way back to the world of the living, often burdened with a great prize or a heavy truth. This is where so many fail. Orpheus, with Eurydice following behind him, possessed the object of his quest, yet his tragic flaw, a moment of very human doubt, caused him to look back and lose her forever. His return was a hollow, solitary ascent into a world that had lost all its color. Aeneas and Dante had to retrace their steps through the horrors they had witnessed, but now armed with a new understanding that would shape their futures and the futures of their people. The Mayan twins achieved the most triumphant return of all, not merely escaping Xibalba, but ascending to become the sun and the moon, transforming the cosmos itself. The Catabosses is never just a thrilling adventure, it is a transformative ordeal. The hero who descends is not the same as the hero who returns. They carry a piece of the underworld back with them, a wisdom forged in darkness that forever alters the world of light. Sometimes the deepest darkness holds the seeds of creation. While many myths cast the underworld as a final destination, others reveal it as a primal womb, a place of origin where life itself is forged from the bones of the dead. This profound duality transforms the land of shadows into a cosmic recycling plant, where endings are merely raw materials for new beginnings. The Aztecs envisioned a universe of successive suns, each one a world that rose and fell in a cycle of catastrophic destruction. Before our own age, the fifth sun, there were 4 previous worlds, each with its own people and each ultimately annihilated. When the gods sought to create the world we inhabit today, they faced a fundamental problem. All the raw matter of creation had been used up, exhausted by the prior cycles. The only substance left with the potent life force necessary for such a monumental task was hidden in the deepest, most silent realm, Mictlan. The great feathered serpent god, Quetzalcoatl, undertook the perilous journey into the land of the dead. He descended through its 9 layers, facing the very trials every soul endures, to stand before the skeletal lords Mictlantecutli and Mictlantecuhtli. Quetzalcoatl begged them for the precious bones of the ancestors from the previous eras. The Lords of Death, perhaps amused by the audacity of the request, agreed, but on one condition: he had to journey around their entire realm while blowing a conch shell trumpet. This was a trick, for the shell had no holes and could not sound. Undeterred, Quetzalcoatl summoned worms to drill holes in the shell and bees to fly inside and make it hum. Hearing the mysterious drone, the death gods relented and gave him the bones. Yet as Quetzalcoatl fled with his treasure, they changed their minds and sent a pit to open in his path. The god stumbled and the bones were scattered and broken by quail. Though he managed to gather most of them, this is why human beings come in all different sizes. Quetzalcoatl carried the shattered bones to the paradise of Tamonchon, where the goddess Cihuacotl ground them into a fine flour. The gods then performed the ultimate act of creation, piercing their own flesh to let their blood drip onto the bone meal. From this sacred mixture of divine blood and ancestral bone, the first humans of the current era were kneaded into life. Our very flesh, in this Aztec vision, is literally born from the underworld. A similar theme echoes from the dusty plains of Mesopotamia. In the epic poem of Atrahasis, the lesser gods, known as the Igigi, rebel against their endless labor of digging the rivers and maintaining the world. Exhausted and angry, they surround the great god Enlil's house, forcing the ruling deities to find a new source of workers. The solution came from the wise god E, who proposed a radical idea: create a new being to bear the workload of the gods. The substance for this new creature was clay, the earth itself, but to give this clay life, to imbue it with a soul and the capacity for intelligent work, required a special ingredient, a divine essence. The gods selected a minor deity named Jeshtu-E, whose name means ear or intelligence, and they slew him in their assembly. With his blood mixed with the clay, the first human beings were fashioned. The crucial detail is Jeshtu-E's nature. He was a god of the underworld. Humanity was not created from the blood of a celestial being, but from the life force of a chthonic deity, a power drawn from the deep earth and the realm of the dead. This is why humans possess wisdom, yet are mortal. Our divine spark comes from a sacrificed God whose domain was the world below. In both of these powerful creation myths, the underworld is not a void of pure negation. It is a reservoir of potent ancestral power. The bones in Mictlan and the blood of Jeshtu represent the concentrated essence of what came before, the necessary ingredient without which new life is impossible. Death is not the opposite of creation, but its most vital partner. This transforms our understanding of these shadowy kingdoms, revealing them not just as lands of final rest, but as the silent, foundational workshops where the world is perpetually remade. For the shaman, the underworld is not a final resting place, but a living library of the soul. Across the cold expanses of Siberia, deep within the Amazon rainforest, and in the sacred traditions of countless indigenous cultures, the shaman embarks on a perilous journey while still very much alive. Entering a deep trance state through the rhythmic beat of a drum, the ingestion of sacred plants, or intense meditation, their consciousness detaches to travel into the lower world. This is not a myth about the dead, but a practiced, vital technique for healing the living. The shaman's purpose is threefold: to retrieve what has been lost, to acquire what is needed, and to converse with the powers that reside in the earth's deepest roots. Imagine a person struck by a sudden, inexplicable illness, a deep malaise that no herbal remedy can touch. In the shamanic view, this is often a case of soul loss, a fragment of the person's vital essence having fled due to trauma or terror, becoming trapped in the shadowy landscapes below. The shaman's core task is to descend into that very underworld, find the lost soul peace, and bravely bring it home, restoring the patient to wholeness. This journey is fraught with danger. The shaman must navigate a terrain filled with deceptive spirits, guardian entities, and the very forces of disintegration. They might have to cross a chasm on a narrow bridge, outwit a menacing watchman, or bargain with a powerful underworld lord for the release of the captive soul. In the Americas, a shaman might journey to retrieve a lost soul by transforming into their power animal, using the creature's instincts and strength to survive the lower world's perils. This role makes the shaman the ultimate living psychopomp, a guide who does not lead the dead to their rest, but rescues the living from a premature descent into the realms of shadow. Beyond retrieving souls, the shaman travels downward to acquire profound knowledge. The underworld is not merely a prison, it is also a source of immense wisdom, particularly concerning healing. The spirits of plants, animals, and ancestors reside there, and they hold the secrets to curing new diseases. A shaman might journey to learn the song of a specific root or to understand the spiritual cause of a community's plague, returning with a new ritual or a forgotten cure that can only be received from the world below. This cyclical journey of descent and return is the shaman's sacred duty, a testament to the belief that the greatest healing and the most vital knowledge often come from a courageous confrontation with the darkness itself. The stark duality of the Chinvat Bridge did not vanish with the Persian Empire. It found new life in the deserts of the Middle East, fundamentally shaping the afterlife beliefs of billions. The ancient Zoroastrian vision of a final judgment, a clear separation of the righteous from the wicked, provided a powerful template that would be adopted and adapted by the emerging Abrahamic faiths. Before Zoroaster, the afterlife in many ancient cultures was a shadowy, often morally neutral existence. But the idea of a single, all-seeing God presiding over a cosmic courtroom, where every soul is held accountable for its thoughts, words, and deeds, is a profound shift that first crystallized in Zoroastrianism. This concept of a final reckoning with its accompanying scales of justice flows directly into the Book of Daniel and the Book of Revelation, where the dead are raised and judged according to their works. The very architecture of the afterlife was reshaped by this Persian influence, creating the heavens and hells we recognize today. The Egyptian weighing of the heart ceremony resonates deeply here. While the Abrahamic faiths replaced the feather of Mot with the Book of Life, the core mechanic remained strikingly similar, a divine assessment of a person's moral character against an absolute standard of truth. Anubis, the guide and operator of the scales, finds a distant echo in the angelic record keepers of Islamic tradition, who note every good and bad deed in a personal ledger. The Greek and Roman realms of Elysium and Tartarus also left their mark, evolving into the clear-cut destinations of heaven and hell. The blissful Elysian fields, a paradise for heroes, transformed into the Christian vision of heaven, a place of eternal peace in the presence of God. Meanwhile, the punitive pit of Tartarus, a prison for divine rebels, contributed to the terrifying imagery of hell as a lake of fire prepared for the devil and his angels. Even the Catholic concept of purgatory, a temporary state of purification for those not yet ready for heaven, reflects a softening of this stark duality. It functions much like a more hopeful version of the Hindu Naraka or the Chinese Diyu, a transitional realm where souls are cleansed of their minor sins before moving on to their final reward. This was not a simple case of one faith copying another, but a slow process of cultural exchange and theological refinement. Early Christian and Islamic thinkers lived in a world steeped in these older ideas, and they wove these powerful, pre-existing threads into the fabric of their own revelations. The result is a theological tapestry where you can still see the patterns of Osiris's hall, the scales of Zoroaster, and the gloomy geography of Hades. These ancient maps of the afterlife did not simply fade away. They were redrawn with new names and new rulers, proving that our deepest questions about what comes next are as old as civilization itself. For all the underworlds we can map and describe, there are others that remain tantalizingly silent, their secrets swallowed by time. The Grand Palace of Knossos on Crete offers no clear tomb inscriptions or papyrus scrolls detailing the Minoan afterlife. We walk through their vibrant, labyrinthine ruins surrounded by images of bulls and double-headed axes, but the silence regarding the dead is profound. What did these sophisticated sea kings believe awaited them beyond the waves? Archaeologists have uncovered complex burial caves and beehive tombs, suggesting a reverence for the dead and a belief in some form of continuation. The presence of ceremonial vessels and offerings implies the dead were thought to need sustenance, a near-universal concept, yet the central figures of their potential underworld are missing. Were they ruled by a fearsome deity, or did they journey to a sunken realm beneath the sea, a reflection of their intimate bond with the ocean? Later Greek myths from the same region speak of King Minos in death becoming a judge in Hades. Could this be a faint, distorted memory of an older Minoan belief, a whisper of their own Lord of the Dead that was absorbed and rewritten by incoming cultures? The mystery only deepens when we look to another great seafaring culture, the Phoenicians. Masters of trade who spread their influence across the Mediterranean, they left behind cargo manifests and city foundations, but very little about their gods of the underworld. We know they worshipped a deity named Eshmon, associated with healing and rebirth, a figure who was later fused with the Greek Asclepius. Could Eshmon have also held dominion over the cycle of life and death, a guardian of a subterranean realm of healing and renewal? Their funerary practices involved elaborate stone sarcophagi and offerings for the journey, pointing to a belief in an afterlife that required preparation. But the destination itself is a blank space on the map. Did they envision a shadowy kingdom like the Greek Hades, or perhaps a celestial paradise influenced by their vast travels and encounters with other civilizations like the Egyptians? Without their own written narratives, we are left with fragments and educated guesses. We see the shadow of their beliefs only in the reflection of the cultures they influenced from North Africa to the coast of Spain. The silence of the Minoans and the Phoenicians serves as a haunting reminder. For every underworld whose story we can tell, there are countless others whose names, rulers, and rivers have faded into an eternal quiet, leaving us to wonder about the countless human hopes and fears that vanished with them. From the silent dust of Urkala to the shimmering islands of the Polynesian afterlife, these 35 underworlds form a breathtaking mosaic of human imagination. Each culture, in its own unique voice, answered the same unanswerable question, sketching maps for a journey every one of us must one day take. They built kingdoms of judgment and realms of quiet rest, envisioned bureaucratic hells and frozen purgatories, all in an effort to make sense of the great silence that follows life. These stories were far more than simple folklore. They were the bedrock of civilization. They provided a moral compass, promising reward for the virtuous and terrifying consequences for the wicked. They offered existential comfort, transforming the terrifying unknown into a landscape that could be navigated, understood, and even challenged by heroes. And most powerfully, they served as profound cultural expression, holding up a mirror to each society's deepest values, fears, and aspirations, from the warrior's code of Valhalla to the intricate administration of Diu. For thousands of years, in the face of our own mortality, we have not stared into a void. We have built worlds. After walking through these 35 remarkable realms, which map feels most true to you? Your own journey through these shadowed realms does not have to end here. Which of these 35 underworlds left the deepest mark on you? Was it the bureaucratic maze of Diu, the chilling silence of Helheim, or the heartbreaking melody of Orpheus? Share the myth that captured your imagination in the comments below, and tell us about any other hidden secrets of the afterlife you believe deserve to be remembered. If you enjoyed this voyage to the edge of the unknown, liking the video helps others discover these stories. For more deep dives into the greatest mysteries of history and mythology, subscribe and join us as we continue exploring the stories that have shaped humanity's deepest fears and highest hopes.